The And Terry Show continues this special edition while we are in isolation from COVID. A few days left to test negative and then back in the saddle with my good friend Jim, hopefully. The things that intrigue me are how do you discern, and I'm using that word with the New Testament sort of spiritual connotation, how do you discern truth? And not being one to be satisfied with esoteric or spiritualized criteria, I stick with data. How do you find out? How do you measure? How do you quantify truth? In some cases, it's harder to do than in other cases. Most often, you could do something like follow the money. True in politics. You want to find out what's real and what's not, follow the money. Want to find out who's influencing who? Follow the money. Want to find out if Big Pharma is behind COVID misinformation? Follow the money. If you want to find out who's influencing which election, which riding, which party, see who the money donors are and see what party they support religiously. And I use that one in the, should I say it's the Romans 9:1 version? Or is it Romans 9:20? Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing that formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? Hath not the potter the power over the clay? And in a case, the last part of that verse is really the one that's troubling to me. Shall the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor, hath the potter not the power over the same clay? The intention to make one for honor and one for what? Yeah, Romans 9 tends to be the catch-all caveat of things that don't make sense. When you don't understand it, when logic cannot be defined by it, you just say, well, man gets in the way. Man gets in the way? Most of what we got that's worthwhile in society today, the modern 21st century, I would dare say comes not from Christian roots or from Judaism or from, as I mentioned in a podcast earlier, the golden age of Islamic science back in the 13th and 14th centuries. However, I would say it's the product of enlightenment and the very essence of what Romans 9:20-21 is railing on about. It's when people actually figure stuff out and determine that what they've been shoveled, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so you ask for some skills that are required for this, and it is the skill that makes the clay honorable. It is the skill of discernment. It is the skill of measuring, quantifying, of being able to determine things, to use forensics, to use principles in order to find out what's the hearsay in something and what is the fact of something. Well, I'm always intrigued by these things. So where am I going? I'm going to an NPR article. And it was just a posting. I follow some different political parties on Twitter just to see how news is getting spun in different ways at different times by different politicians. And the title of this one got me, but backing it up just a bit, I found it under someone who is a political commentary from the liberal side of things. And its application is what got me, because of course it's applying this red-blue analysis from the United States into a Canadian conservative versus liberal context in Canada. And the person went on to say this on the Twitter posting. I find it interesting, and I've witnessed it myself many times on Twitter. It's why disinformation is always aimed at conservative supporters, because the people who promote this disinformation know they'll believe whatever fake news they throw at them. And Pierre Poilievre knows it too. And the reference, the one that's being quoted and promoted, is from NPR. And the title was called What We Learned When We Tracked Down and Talked to a Fake News Creator in the Suburbs. And the quote that is following that: "We tried to do similar things with liberals. It's just never worked. It never takes off. You get debunked within the first two comments, and then the whole thing just kind of fizzles out." Ironically, this guy's job is CEO of Disinfo Media. And that's where the story takes off and why I thought it was interesting. I'm often one who says you can tell. And whether that's January 6th, the investigations, the committee, those who presented, those who wanted to acquit Donald Trump of his charges for his his impeachment, both of them. And the ones who supported and followed the evidence and the ones who tried to obstruct. You sure know you're not on the right track when your job is obstructing. Obstructing, does that sound like Pierre Poilievre in Canadian politics? A lot of naysaying, a lot of finger wagging and tongue wagging, but I don't see a lot of anything in terms of concrete policies. Well, why is it that Conservatives are then popular? Why is it that Trump is the leading candidate? 4 major criminal court cases and 91 charges, and he's still the leading candidate for the GOP in the United States. How does that work? In what world does that make sense? And I can apply the same analysis, the same lens to Canada and the Conservative Party of Canada and its leader, Pierre Poilievre. So here's what the industry, this is from NPR, and the article is called "We Tracked Down a Fake News Creator in the Suburbs, and Here's What We Learned." November 23rd. Although this is an older article, so that's kind of interesting. So this would be on the run-up to the 2016 election. A lot of fake and misleading news stories are shared across social media during election campaigns, and one that got a lot of traffic had this headline from 2016. Quote, "FBI agents suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide," unquote. The story, of course, was completely false, but it had been shared before it was taken down over 500,000 times. So NPR did some investigative reporting, wondered who was behind that story and why it was written. And it appeared on a site that had the actual look and feel of a real newspaper, the DenverGuardian.com. It had the local weather posted. It had one news story, although it is a fake one as well. So NPR tried to look up who owned it, and they hit a wall. The site was registered anonymously. So we brought in some professional forensic help. By day, this guy is a head of engineering at Master McNeil, a tech company in Berkeley, and he started examining it through the forensic lens. And he found that there's all kinds of stuff. He approaches his science, this this head of engineering, and looked at it. The Denver Guardian was built and designed using a pretty common platform, WordPress, and it's used by bloggers and people who want to create their own websites. But he found that it's a first entry-level composition. The site was done by someone with a handle called Let Texas Secede. It sounds like Wexit for West Exit in Canada. Yeah, so you see common threads. And that's the sort of thread that starts to unravel everything. Once you begin to find these kinds of bits of forensic detail, you can find and track threads to a whole bunch of other sites where all of these things tend to coalesce. The sites include nationalreport.net, usatoday.com.co, washingtonpost.com.co. All the addresses are linked to single rented servers inside Amazon Web Services. And that they meant they were all very likely owned by the same company. They found only one email address on one of those sites and was able to link that address to a name. And from there, NPR did the legwork of a reporter, finding the owner and making contact. And he's actually listed under LinkedIn. So it's funny that you can track this stuff down. The NPR reporter set out with a producer for the suburb of Los Angeles, a middle-class neighborhood, pastel-colored, one-story beach bungalows. What does it go on to do? Well, he goes on to say that they found that they own a number of fake news sites. He won't say how many. He agreed to an interview, and this is funny because he makes money off of fake news, so why would he agree to an interview with NPR? Need to dig a bit into that one. Its owner says that he has between 20 and 25 writers that he employs, and it was one of them who wrote the story in the Denver Guardian that an FBI agent who leaked Clinton emails was killed. And he said that over 10 days since they created that article, fake news, the site got 1.6 million views. And he said stories like this work because they fit into existing right-wing conspiracy theory mindsets. Quote, people want to hear this stuff, he says, quote, so all it took was to write that story. Everything about it was fictional. The town, the people, the sheriff, the FBI, and then our social media guys kind of go out and do a little dropping through Trump groups and Trump forums, and pretty soon it starts to spread like wildfire. I'm just going to leave it at that. The article, you can check for it. I'll put a link in the description. And it's just a question of how fake news spreads and why. And I think that's an amazing thing because we can all be duped. I'm not saying it's the right of some that can do this, and if you're really intelligent and really smart, you won't be suckered in. We can all be suckered in. So you got to do your own due diligence and know what sources you cite. And if the sources that you continually feed from for your news and information are repeatedly, demonstrably refuted by other sources, caveat emptor, buyer beware. We tracked down a fake news creator in the suburbs, and here's what we learned. Find it out, read it for yourself, npr.org. The Jim and Terry Show, signing off for today. Bye-bye for now.